Good morning, Rahul.
Good morning. Okay, so welcome to all. So if you go back to our last class, okay, so the first class, what we had done in the last week, okay, so we discussed about the concepts of differentiation between the SAP S4 HANA and SAP HANA. What is the SAP HANA? What exactly mean to you by what is the business suite and what is the business suite on HANA and what is SAP S4 HANA? Can anybody can tell me the what exactly the difference is between the SAP S4 HANA and SAP HANA? What is the difference? What you understood, okay, about my last class, okay? What is the differentiation between SAP S4?
SAP HANA is the database.
So we call SAP HANA is a database. So
S4
what is
HANA
this?
is the application.
Exactly. SAP S4 HANA is an application. Can I call the SAP S4 HANA as, can I call the SAP S4 HANA as S4 core? Can I call it as the S4 core?
Yes, yes, that's the S4 core.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm calling the SAP S4 HANA as an SAP S4 core. So as we go back to our last class, I have given the definition. What is an SAP S4 HANA? SAP S4 HANA is the next generation business suite. We call it as a next generation business suite, which is fully built on in-memory database platform. So the word itself is telling that. So now when you go to the definition, I understood that, okay, the S is nothing but S core is nothing but my application core. This is my application core, fourth generation core application, which is fully built. So where is this application? If I take my S4 core as an application, if I take my S4 core as an application here, where is this S4 core? This S4 core is on the database where we call it as a fully built on in-memory database platform. We call it as a in-memory. So here the in-memory is nothing but we call it as a SAP HANA. Actually, SAP HANA is a database. And it is a multi-tenant database. It is a multi-tier database. It is also called as in-memory database. Again, I'm telling you, it's a multi-tiered database. It is a multi-tenant database, means several databases are there in SAP HANA. SAP HANA is not a single tenant of database. It's a multi-tenant database. Now, on the top of this SAP HANA, we have an application. We have an application called as our S4 core. Our S4 core is nothing but your application. S4 core is nothing but your application. The core release, when you go to the core release, we have two deployment options as of now. Okay, so forgot about the hybrid. We have called as cloud. I'll tell you the differentiation in the coming CLOUD cloud, and we have on-premise. And we have the on-premise. Now, when you go to the S4 core, so what is the application core release? We definitely we have to know this. For example, tomorrow if I am going to applying any SAP note, I am applying an SAP note which has been released from the SAP. So to apply this note, the SAP, okay, the team is very clear. They have mentioned that this particular note is only applicable for the S4 core 101, 102, 103, and 104. So what are this example? Okay, so when I call the S4 core, now today the S4 core, the latest S4 core application number is 104. Please make a note of all of these. 104 is nothing but your application core. We have, okay, so when you go back to from 2015, when the SAP S4 HANA has been introduced for both on-premise and the cloud. So we came out with the release of 1511. 1511 is the SAP S4 HANA first SAP S4 HANA release in the market, comprises of both on-premise and the cloud. And then if we talk more onto the on-premise, 1610, 1709, 1809, and today we are in 1909, on-premise release of 1909. So this 1909 is called as S4 Core 404. I mean, so the release is going to be called as 104 Core Application Module. Very, very important. So 100, the first release is called as the 100, and this is called as 101, 102, and this is 103. These are going to be called as core application. Now, yes, I understand the basics. So just go back to my last class. So I given the differentiation. I call you what is the SAP business suite. Why I called you what is the SAP business suite on HANA, and I call you what is the SAP S4 HANA also. Now, the concept is very clear here for me. I mean to say that now when I go into the concept of SAP HANA as a database, I'm calling the SAP HANA database as an in-memory database. I call it as an SAP HANA database. So what is the in-memory? First of all, I would like to understand from the functional point of view. We are not going to go into the very detailed about the technical. We are not going to cover more into the detailed about the technical because we don't require that much knowledge about the technicality wise how the SAP HANA database is going to be executed. But when I go into the functionality of SAP HANA as a database, so we call it as an in-memory database. What is the in-memory database? So let me talk about more into that. So I take a database. Normally, when you go back to your Oracle database or something like MSQL database or any database, apart from SAP HANA database, we call it as a disk process. We call them as a disk process actually. So the processing is going to be happened at the time of disk processing to extract the data from your desired database tables. So completely it is based on the disk process. So my SAP HANA is also working on the disk process, but on the top of the disk process, there is an application, very, very important here. So I have an application. My application is going to be called as S4 Core. S4 Core is nothing but my application. S4 Core is nothing but my application, and this is my database. We call it as a SAP HANA as a database. SAP HANA as a database. Go back to my previous, okay, go back to your previous experience on SAP, okay, which the underlying database is going to be any other database. There are two charts are there, what are they? I'm not getting audio. Are you hearing? What are the topics are covering to finish today? Mani, are you not able to hear the voice? Mani? Sir, good morning. Okay. Mani, could you please check your audio from your side? I think all the participants are listening my voice. Is it correct that everybody is able to hear my voice with a proper way?
I can hear you.
Yes. Yeah. Mani, I think the problem is from your side. Could you please check once again? Asha, good morning. Today we are covering about the concepts of in-memory and the columnar storage. Okay. So now application, we know about the application. Application is where exactly the programming is going to be working. Nothing but application is called as a kernel level software. We call it as a kernel level software. We call it as a kernel level software actually. So when you go back to your previous database like MSQL or Oracle or any other databases, actually those databases are only dedicated, very, very important. Those databases are only dedicated for the data services, means to extract the data. So they are going to perform you only the database activity to store the data in their respective database tables. That's all. So these databases are going to be working as a disk process. There is the processing is there, but they're completely processing on the disk process. So what is happening? The throughput, when you call it as a throughput is nothing but the seconds which is taking you to extract the number of MB of the data, or MB or KB or GB of the data. How much seconds the data is going to be extracted from the database. So the throughput is very, 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 very low when you go back to your SAP with other database platforms. Means It is taking, to extract the data, it is taking something about 40 to 50 seconds of the data for only 1 month or 2 months of the data. I mean, the throughput is very, very low. Why? Because in the back end, if I go and observe the database, it is completely on the disk processing. Now, what I'm going to do in my SAP HANA also, there is a database which is working on the disk process. So completely there is a concept of disk processing is also there in my database. So this is completely based on the disk processing. But what is the difference here? Disk processing, very, very important. But what is the difference here? And my CPU is also very far from here. So where exactly my CPU is also very far away from my disk process. So when you see the difference between my disk processing and the CPU, the distance is also very, 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 very huge. Means the far away from my CPU. So this is the old concept what we are working right now in the market. Now, what SAP has thought about bringing about the new database into the platform. So normally everybody knows what is a RAM. So I'm going to take the RAM. Now the RAM has become, okay, it is a very affordable. Okay, anybody can purchase about the RAM. Now to 1 TB, 2 TB, 3 TB of the RAM is going to be available in the market. So nothing to be worried about that. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take one more database that is nothing but I'm going to be using the RAM, which I call it as a DRAM. DRAM is nothing but we call it as a database RAM. DRAM is nothing but we call it as a database RAM. And this RAM I'm going to be taking as a concept of in memory. Now, what is the in memory? Your complete application means your complete application is going to fit in your DRAM now from today onwards. Very, very important. Your complete application data is going to fit into the DRAM now. Earlier, what is happening? Your application is separated and your database is separated. Means there is no concept of in-memory database earlier. Now I'm going to bring a new database structure into the SAP world called as a database in memory. Now what I'm going to do here is your complete application processing means your complete application data is going to fit into the DRAM. Now your DRAM is very near to your CPU. So if you see the distance between the CPU and the DRAM is very, 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 very near to your CPU now from today onwards. Okay. Now, when I see this complete application is going to fit into one database now from today onwards, which is called as the DRAM, I have several advantages are there. One advantage is nothing but I can see the application services in the database, very, very important. These all are going to be playing the major role when you're writing the certification. Application processing. So your complete application processing of the data is going to be working in the DRAM. And the second one, very, very important, data services, database services. Your complete database services activities are going to be performing in your database. So now what is happening? Earlier, I only see the database services are going to be working. Your application processing is going to be working only at the time of application. Now I can see your DRAM is also making you to available of the application processing means, okay, so if I see the diagram, if I brought the diagram for you, all of you, if you just come down here, if you see this diagram, this will be giving you the complete understanding about the platform. Now, your application service means your web service, your JavaScripts and the graphical model, everything is working on your HANA database. And not only that, processing services like whatever the planning of the data, series of the data, functionality of the libraries of the parallelization processing is going to be working, and the integration services like ETL, replication, everything. And these three actually earlier, it is dedicated to your application. Means earlier, if you go back to your SAP, ECC, it is only dedicated to your application level, whereas your underlying database is going to serve you only the purpose of database services. Your application, your underlying database services are going to be working only on the database services earlier if you go back. Now, what I want to do here is nothing but, now I'm bringing all these services now from today onwards. Okay, everything means your application is going to fit into the in-memory database. So what is happening here? Now I can get all the application services from the database and see the processing services, integrated services, and apart from that, the own database services also are going to be getting from the in-memory from today. So what is happening tomorrow? When I want to pull any report, something like, okay, so my front end, I'm going to be using the Fiori. The front end, what I'm going to do, I'm using the Fiori. Fiori as is nothing but my front end application where for all the transactional data and the analytical processing and the fact sheet data. Now, I'm going to be using the Fiori as my front end from today. I know Fiori is nothing but, okay, so it is nothing but, okay, your reporting system, okay, where you can do the transactions and analytics and everything. Fiori is a new application, okay. So when I want to pull any reports, when I want to pull any kind of reports or any kind of analytical fact sheet reports or something like analytical data now from tomorrow for tomorrow's decision making support system, whatever it may be. So now this Fiori is getting the data from your in-memory database system, not from the disk process. So it will extract the data from your in-memory. Why? Because the data has been resided in the DRAM, which is very near to my CPU. So what is happening here? The throughput is very, 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 very high. What do you mean by throughput? Now, whatever the data which is extracting today, which is taking about not more than 6 to 7 seconds, means the number of MB or KB of the data which I'm extracting from my in-memory database. Now, what is happening here? The data has been resided in my DRAM and I'm extracting the data within 6 to 7 seconds. Earlier, the same data which I'm extracting from my disk process, it is taking more than 30 to 40 seconds. Now, the major thing which is going to be impacted over here is nothing but which I can see the advantage in my SAP HANA memory is nothing but my throughput is very, 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 very high compared with my Oracle database or my any other database systems. Now, point number 2, very, very important. Point number 2. Now, there are 2 types of data will be there. One is going to be calling it as a frequently accessing the data. Second one, we are going to be calling it as a rarely accessing the data. We are going to be calling it as a rarely accessing the data. When you call it as a frequently accessing the data, so normally every 2 days or something like every day before I start off my working, okay, so before I start my day working, so I need to extract some reports for the management decision making support, okay, something like management decision making, something like whatever the reports like something about, we call it as something like operational data or something like a decision making support system data, whatever maybe. Now every day this is my activity. So there is a report where we call it as a customer aging analysis report. Customer aging report. This report I had to execute and I had to submit to my manager every day before I stepped on to the next activity. So I had to complete this task and I had to mail this report to my manager. Then I had to start my regular work. Very, very important here. Now, what is happening? When I'm doing this activity on the day-to-day basis, so already when I go and extracting the report, when I'm extracting the report from my database system, from the in-memory database system, already, if we go into the backend means already, if I go into the backup, so system already taken this report as a backup and it has been stored in a self-service mode, So already I have given all the parameters to my DRAM. Every day I'm giving the same parameters to my DRAM, like customer number, what is the date, what is the business area, what is the company code, from which date to which date I want this report. Already from few days, I'm extracting the same report from past few days. So what this database will do, my DRAM will do, so already these parameters are going to be loaded and it will create another very, very important. It will create one artificial, very, very important. See the words. It will create one artificial mode extraction in the backup. So it is in the back end. If you go and see already my parameters are already been stored. Now tomorrow, if I come and execute the same report, My DRAM will not go and do all the parallel processing. Already yesterday you have executed the same report. First, it will go and see whether the report has been frequently executed. Yes, if it has already frequently executed, so it will go and give the same report with the different parameters, and you can see the report within 3 to 4 seconds. If this is not the process, if you go back, if this is not happening, if I go to my Oracle database or some other databases, so this kind of activity is not going to be performed. Means every day it has to do all the parallel processing. It has to go to the database, it has to do the parallel processing, it has to get the data from the database table, then the report has to be compiled, then you have to get the report. That is what every day it is getting, but not in my case of SAP HANA as a database. Very, very important. That activity, I call it as application processing. Now, normally we call it as application services. This is what exactly I call it as a application services, where a backup file will be created. A backup file is created automatically, which the frequently accessing the data is getting executed. Very, very important. That data is going to be stored where? That data will be stored in the DRAM. So that is called as my hard data. Very, very important. Please make a note. That data is called as the hard data. Hard data. Where will be the hard data? The hard data will be resided in your DRAM. And there are some rarely accessing the data, means every once or 6 months or something like one a year or something like quarterly or something like whatever maybe. There are some data is there. So which I'm not going to be executing on the daily axis or something like on a couple of days. So this is the data, this is the report I'm going to be using as a quarterly audit report or something like off-yearly audit report or annually audit report. That report is going to be stored in the disk processing, not in the DRAM. I'll not store in the DRAM. That data will be stored in the disk processing. Okay. So why? Because that is not going to be frequently using from my purpose. So that data will be calling it as a rarely accessing the data. We call it as a cold data. We call it as a cold data. If you see the difference here, so I'm segregating the data depends upon the day-to-day activities what I'm going to be performing. So that is the reason where I'm going to be calling your complete S4 core application, means your core application is going to be resided in the DRAM. So all the data will be executed. Means now today we have 3 advantages. One is going to be calling it as in multi-core processing. Multi-core processing, very, very important. And second one is instant insight. Instant insight. And the third one is compressing of the data. Compression of the data. Very, very important. So when you come to my in memory, I can see the compression of the data here. Compression of the data means when I see the same data in my Oracle database, go back to your Oracle database. So I'm talking here in my DRAM, I have totally 2 years of data has been resided in the DRAM, or maybe 16 months of data or something like 1 year of data has been resided in the DRAM. So the data when I see the data in my DRAM, it is about something like 1 TB. Example, okay, I'm going to be taking it as a 1 TB or 500 GB whatever maybe. Now the same data, when I see the same data in my if I go and see in my other secondary database system, so it is more than 1 TB of the data. It is more than 1.5 or something like, it may be up to 2 TB of the data also. Why? Because there in other databases there is no compression of the data, but I can see the compression of the data in my DRAM. How the data is going to be compressed? Because the compression of the data is completely based on my structure. Means every database table, if you go back to your every database table, the data will be stored into different forms. One is going to be calling it as a row based, and the second one we call it as a columnar storage. Okay, so let me get logging into the SAP now. Okay, see here. So I'll go back to, okay, so I'll log into the new system. So here, if you see here, there are two systems are there, okay, in my SAP logon pad. One is going to be called as your SAP ECC, okay. Second one, we call it as SAP S4HANA on-premise of 1909. See the difference here. Now let me log into the ECC system first of all. Let me log into the ECC. This is not SAP S4HANA. This is the ECC application server. Okay. Now I'm also getting logging to the SAP S4HANA 1909, which is the latest one. Okay, so latest on-premise release, current on-premise release. Instead of calling the latest, we call it as the current on-premise release. This is my. Now see here. Now, how do I identify? See, both the systems are looking on the same. This is my ECC. If you see here, my system ID is called as the EPX. So when we get into the practicals, you will come to know more about this. But just for information, just I'm giving some clue about the differentiation between ECC server and the SAP S4HANA server. So the system ID of ECC is nothing but EPX, and the system ID of SAP S4HANA is nothing but DB1. DB1. You can see the difference between the two systems, EPX and the DB1. But when I see here, both are going to be working on the same platform. That is nothing on my ERP application platform, both on-premise. Okay, this is my on-premise release. This is not a cloud. In the cloud, when you go to the cloud, there are two versions of it. One is going to be called as a public cloud and the private cloud. Okay, tomorrow, therefore tomorrow we have a class on the public cloud and the private cloud, and the difference between the cloud and the on-premise. So we have some slides. We'll walk through the slides. Okay, tomorrow, after tomorrow, when we coming to the topic of the differentiation between the cloud and the on-premise. Now, when I go into the SAP ECC, okay, now when I click on the system, and I would like to see my application and the underlying database also. Application and the underlying database. Now, when I click onto the status, now here, if you see very carefully here, this is nothing but my system status screen. Now, here, the core application which you are going to be running, the name of your application, the server name is going to be called as EPS, and my database is working not on HANA database, it is working on my MSQL database. Where is, see here, MSSQL database system. It is not a SAP HANA database. It is on MSSQL database, and my core application, when you see the core application here, my core application product details I can see in the component. And here in the component, if I go and see here, just find out, just come here, my SAP Finance. Okay, if you see here, my SAP Finance is on SAP ECC 6. Okay, this is nothing but my release, SAP ECC release 6.18. Okay, this is what exactly 618 is the release. Now, when I go to the same system credentials of my SAP S4HANA, same thing, system, I'll go to my status, but here if you observe, my database is not on MSSQL. If you see here, my database is on HDB. What do you mean by HDB? HDB is nothing but your HANA database. My dear friends, your SAP S4 core application can only built on HANA in-memory database only. No other databases can be supported for your SAP S4 HANA core application. Very, very important. This is the point. That is the reason your cloud or whether it is an on-premise, both deployment options can be done only on the SAP HANA database only. No other databases can be supported. Okay, so my database today I'm working on HDB. The version release is going to be 2.0. Currently, HANA database version is working on the 2.4. Now, when I click on the details of application, here you can see the details of my S4 core. Where is my S4 core? Here is my S4 core. My application is here. My application is here. The core application release today, we are working with 104. You can see here 104 is nothing but it is 1909. As I told you in the beginning of the class, I told that we are in the 1909 with the core application release. Your application is working on which release right now? You can easily identify. One of your friend is asking you, hey, Mr. X, so what is the application currently we are running? So you can easily go to the status and you can easily communicate to your friend, tell that, okay, this is your application you're working. So it is a 1809 or 1909 or whatever maybe. So your core application is going to be working on 104. 104 is nothing but your application release of 1909. So if I click on the installed product versions, here you can see here SAP S4 HANA on-premise 1909 with the shipment, with the basic shipment call. So there will be something like, okay, we can see there. Okay, so service packs are going to be released. Future service packs and the shipment packs are going to be released every quarterly. So you can see the initial shipment stock. Your current version is working on with 1909. So here in this application, when I go and see one table, like for example, if I go and see one table, for example, I'll go and see the table called as my FI table, which is called as the BSEC table. BSEC is nothing but your FI table. So what does it mean that now when you go back, to your database, your database has been designed, okay, based on the data processing based on the row based, and the second one is going to be calling it as a columnar. Column based. Very, very important. When you come to the row based, you can't see the compression of the data. Very, very important. I cannot compress the data when I'm in the row based. I can't do any kind of compression of the data when I'm going to be using the row based. But when I see in the columnar storage, I can see the compression of the data. No, in the row based, I cannot see any kind of compression of the data. I can't compress the data. So what is the compression? I'll tell you. What is the compression? There is one example I'm going to be taking. I can tell you what is the compression. But when I see in the columnar, I can do the compression of the data. Okay, I can see the compression of the data. So now when I see this data in the row base data is going to be up to 1 TB here. Now the same data, when I migrated to my SAP HANA database, I can compress the data up to 500 GB. Means very, very important, 500 GB I'm going to be compressing, means more storage capacity is available for the further data processing. So if I come and see one table, I'm just looking out for one table, which is called as your BSEC table. BSEC table is as a line item table. Now it is also active in my SAP S4 HANA. Now if I click on display, now this is my BSEC table. If I go to the technical settings, if I click on my technical settings, Asha, I will give some examples. Okay, so when we are taking the row based and the column based, I'll take you one example. Okay, don't worry. And Nirmit Modi, I think you have columns and rows wrongly way around. Oh my God, real. Oh, sorry. I'm extremely sorry. So I thought this is the column. So I just changed the name. So I'm extremely sorry for that. Okay, so I just changed that. I just overlooked over here. So sorry, I'm extremely sorry. Thank you, Modi. Thanks a lot. Okay, so so this is a column. Okay, sorry. I'm in the flow, so I could not identify. Okay, so this is the row base. Sorry. Extremely sorry for that. Okay, now, if I come and see here, when I click on the DB specific properties, okay, so when I click on the DB specific properties, now here you can see here that storage type is going to be defined with the 3 levels. One is going to be calling it as a columnar storage. Second one, we call it as a row storage. And the third one is going to be called as undefined. What do you mean by undefined? Okay, undefined is nothing but, now I'll tell you one example here. Now, when you go back to your SAP ECC, and when I'm migrating the data from the Oracle database to your SAP HANA database, okay, now see here. All of you, this is very, very important now. All of you, very, very important here. Now, I am on SAP ECC. I am on my SAP ECC, and I'm doing the conversion from SAP ECC to SAP S4HANA. Very, very important. I am doing the conversion. So let me remove this, because anyhow we are going to discuss on the row base and the column base one more time. Okay, so I just want to just come out from this. Okay. Now, when I am on SAP ECC, I see my application and the underlying database, and here also you have the application and your underlying database. Now, my dear friends, most of you, I think by seeing so many blogs in the Google, okay, by this time you have got the concept of simplification. There is a word frequently everybody using the word called as the simplification, simplification, simplification. Simplification. So people are asking you, hey, did you got the simplification list of 1909? Hey, have you got the simplification list of 1809? So people are asking something like simplification list, simplification list. What is this simplification list actually? What does it mean that? So simplification is nothing but, now what happened here, you have different processes, okay, something like you have a different process, okay, like GL process, vendor process, customer process, payment process, like asset accounting process, like that you have a different types of process. Okay, so for example, now I'll take you one example now. When you go to your asset accounting in SAP ECC, see, very, very important. When I go to my when I go to my GL, I'll take a very small example, general ledger. When I go to my general ledger in SAP ECC, not in SAP S4HANA, my dear friends. So we have different tables are there. One is going to be called as a total tables. We have different types of tables are there. Total tables, aggregate tables, secondary, index tables, header table. Like this, we have a different type of table. Okay. Now, what has happened here, when I am posting a transaction in my SAP, forget about SAP S4HANA for a meanwhile. Forget about SAP S4HANA. I'm talking only the concept from the SAP ECC point of view. Now I'm posting a transaction, like for example, I'm posting a transaction like this. Okay. So what is the transaction I'm posting? Like salaries, account debit to my cash or bank account credit. This is the transaction. This is called as a transactional data. This transactional data, what is I'm going to do? I'm entering in my view from the application. It will go and store in the database. It will, where is the database? Here, the database is here. How the data is going to be stored? The data is going to be stored in a row base. It is not stored in a columnar storage. It is because my database structure, my database storage type is row based, not as a column based. Okay, so here you can see it is a row base. It is not a column storage. Okay, now what are the tables? There are, okay, when I store the data, there are two tables are going to be, there are two tables. Okay, one is going to, so when I go and extract the data will be extracted from the two tables. One is the header table called as the BKPF and BKPF. Another data is going to be called as the line item level table. We call it as a BSEC table. And apart from that, when you're posting something like secondary index table data, like open items, like outstandings or anything, so my secondary index tables are also going to be captured the data. So we can see the data in the secondary index. So we can see these are the different tables I can see which are available in my SAP S4HANA. Sorry, in my SAP ECC, like we have the total tables, aggregate tables, secondary index tables, like we have this header database table. So why is it going to be required? Is it required? These many tables are going to be required. Why should we require these many tables? Why can't we simplify the tables now? The concept of simplification has started from the database tables. Why can't I simplify the process? Why don't we require these many tables? So what is happening earlier? What is happening earlier means when you go back to your something like 4 to 5 years back, when I see there are in my database, on the database, there are two tables are there. One is going to be calling it as the BSEG, another one is going to be calling it the BKPF. On the top of your database, on the top of your database tables, I can see so many secondary index tables are built on my database table. So many secondary index tables are built on my database tables. So if I see my architecture, it is going to look like this. If I see my architecture, it is going to look like this. These are your database tables. BSEG and the BKPF or the underlying BKPF and the BSEG are going to be called as the database tables. On the top of your database tables, I can see that my application consultants who are going to be calling your technical ABAPers, okay, they're going to build a logic. Okay, on the top of each and every database table, they're going to build some secondary index tables. Why? Because to bring the performance, to optimize the performance on the database tables. So I'm writing some aggregates and the secondary indexes on the top of your database tables. Very, very important. So what is happening here? Your programming is going to be increasing. Your structural means your application. When you see the technical language of your programming is going to be increasing.
Can you please expand on this, please? The secondary tables, please.
So, okay. Secondary tables. So for example, here I can take you one secondary. So for example, you have so many secondary tables are there. So for example, if I take BSIS, BSID, BSIK, these all are nothing but your secondary index tables. So BSIS, what is the BSIS? BSIS is the secondary index tables for the GL. BSID is the secondary index tables for the customers, and BSIK is the secondary index tables for the vendors. So like this, we have other secondary index tables like BSAS, BSAD, BSAK. Like this, we have several index tables are also going to be there. Now, what is happening? So these secondary index tables. So what I'm going to do here is nothing but earlier my technical team, my ABAPers, they are going to build a logic, something like that. They are going to build a logic based on the several secondary index tables on the top of your database table. Why should it required? It requires. Why? Because if I pull a report, if I get the report directly from the BKPF and the BSEG, so what is happening? There will be a runtime error will be going to be triggered. So I want to optimize as much as an extent of what I can do. I had to optimize my application processing so that I'm going to build my secondary index tables on the top of your database tables actually to pull out the logic. Now, in SAP S4HANA,
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So in my SAP HANA, what I'm going to do here, no need to have the secondary index tables on your top of your database table. Now I'm simplifying your process very easily. Don't require any kind of, everything is going to be on the fly mode. I'll tell you what is the fly mode. Everything you're going to design on the fly mode. So no need to require any logic or defining your secondary index tables from today in SAP S4HANA. Mean to say that now from today in SAP S4HANA, when you go to the SAP HANA database here, I don't have any kind of secondary index tables now from today onwards. So what is happening here? I'm simplifying your process in such a way that now what is happening now from today onwards, I'm going to give you only one table. I'm going to give you only one table for all the line item processing, where you can have all the data in one table. That table I'm going to be calling it as a ACDOCA table. So I'm going to give you only one table, my dear friends. No need to have any kind of secondary index on the top of your database tables from today onwards. So remove all the secondary index tables, means you don't have any secondary index tables from today onwards. So now from today onwards, all the data will be resided in one table called as ACDOCA table. And on the top of it, we have the same header table, which is going to be calling it as the BKPF. Now what is happening? Now SAP, what it has done here is nothing but now we don't have this kind of concept of total tables. We don't have the concept of aggregate tables. We don't have the concept of secondary index tables and everything. We have only one table from today onwards where we can get all the data from the AC DOCA table. That is nothing but accounting document, which is going to be calling it as the actuals. This is A stands for actuals. Accounting document actual. So what I'm going to do, I simplified your general ledger now from today now. So you can find all the simplification. What are all the processes have been simplified? Which are all the tables have been removed? Which are all the tables have been moved as the CDS views and the compatibility views? I tell you what is the views also. So I can see all this kind of information in my simplification. So every version 1919. So tomorrow in the next year, we are going to see the 21 and whatever maybe. In every release, SAP is going to release you some simplification. If you go and see the simplification, you can understand the difference of 1819 to the 1919. So what simplifications have been done between these two versions? So the basic simplifications are going to be observed in my simplification list. Sir, you can ask your questions now.
Hey, Mahesh, sorry. I have a quick question here. So, so I understand that SAP has decommissioned all these secondary tables, right?
Yeah.
The secondary indexes, but the BKPF and B6 still exist,
Exactly.
right? And the AC DOCA, is the new table. And it's, when I have seen the data, I mean, I see it's purely redundant between the existing BKPF and BSEG, which have been carried as is into S4, but also the same data is maintained in AC Doc A, right?
Very
So
good.
why what's the difference between those two sets of tables?
Very good question, sir. So now, okay, let me go into that. Oh, you have worked in SAP ECC earlier?
Yes, I mean,
Yeah. So you have some exposure on ECC, yeah, right?
I mean, I worked on ECC and S4 both. I mean, I've been on the systems for last more than 10 years.
Okay. Okay. I'll tell you one example, sir, now. Okay. Now, earlier, what is happening? Okay, when you come back to this particular screen here. Earlier, all the open items or the cleared items are going to be stored in my secondary index table. So for example, if I take one example, sir, if I take one example here. Okay, I'm taking something called as a vendor invoice. I'm taking the example of vendor invoice. Okay, in the vendor invoice, what is happening? The vendor account is getting created and my some GL account, whatever the GL account. So I can take it as the GRIR clearing account. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, the GL account will become the debit. This is my transaction when I got the vendor invoice.
Hey, Mahesh, if you don't mind, can you take an example of like an account receivable transaction?
Okay, I'll take one account receivable. So can I call it as a customer and something like that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Customer invoice is fine.
Yeah. Customer account debit. Okay, I can take it as a sales revenue. So I take it as a sales revenue. Is clear, sir?
Yeah, so the sales revenue basically is the customer invoice, right? And the customer
so sales revenue is a
the
GL account. Actually, sales revenue, we call it as a GL account, general ledger account.
All right. Okay. So the revenue account. And what's the account on the top for the debit?
The debit, I'm going to be doing the party account. This is my customer.
Customer account. Okay.
Okay. Customer is nothing but, okay, where you're going to be doing the sales to a person. Okay. Now, now when I see this accounting entry, this is completely, I can call it as the open item account. I mean to say that this is a billing. It's a document where I can call it as a customer invoice. It is not a vendor invoice. It is called as a customer invoice.
Right.
Okay. Now, the customer is liability now to my company. I'm right or wrong? So the customer has to, because I done the goods of sold. Okay, I have done the goods delivery and I have raised the invoice to the customer. Now the customer has to pay the amount to my company. Okay, mean to say that now he is the liability to make the payment. Now, there are two views will be there. One we is going to be calling it as entry view, and the second one we call it as a general ledger view. Every document in SAP will have the two views will be there. One is called as entry view, and the second one we call it as a general ledger view. So why it is required, I'll tell you now. Now, this transaction has posted in the sales and distribution model, not directly in my SAP FI. It has been posted in sales and distribution model. It is an integrated accounting entry. It is an integrated accounting entry. Now, when I come to my finance, module, all the customer transactions are going to be built in a subledger, which is going to be calling it as my account receivable. Actually, we call it as the account receivable. AR, we call it as the AR module. And finance, the central tenant of total accounting system, we call it as a GL. GL is the main ledger and the AR is the subledger. And this is my GL, general ledger. Now, I can call it as a complete open item document. Very, very important. I can call it as an open item, means it is an outstanding document because the customer is the liability for me. Customer has to pay the amount. I already raised the invoice to the customer. Now the customer has to pay the amount immediately or something like within 14 days, whatever the payment terms have been assigned to him. Now, when I go and see the document which has hit to my AR, that is the functional module, that is my financial module. Very, very important. So when I open the same document in my AR, this document I can see in two tables, sir. One is very, very important, sir. One is BKPF, and because it is an open item document, I can see the transaction is also got posted to my another table, which is going to be calling it as BSID table. BKPF and the BSID, and at the same time BSEC table is also getting updated. Now, why? Because it is an open item document, so it is called as the secondary index tables. I'm going to see that this table is nothing but my secondary index tables actually. So earlier the SAP has divided that all the secondary index tables are separated and all your header tables are separated and all your total tables and all your line item tables are going to be separated. Now, if I open this document in my functional module, in my finance module, so what is happening here, you can see here now. Okay, so I'll go back. I'll take you one example now. Now I'm coming to my system. Okay, there are no documents are there. Otherwise, I'll take you one document which is related to my SC. Okay, so because there are no other documents are there, so I'll take one example. Okay, I'll take in one example. Now, this is the example. Understand? This is my document. Now, a customer account to something like okay revenue. Now, there are two views will be there. This is my entry view, and if I switch on to the general ledger view, this is my general ledger view. This is my general ledger view, and this is my entry view. What is the entry view here? Entry view is nothing but, so I'm getting some little bit of background noise. If somebody is not talking, you can mute your call, sir, please. Okay, thank you. So every document will have two views will be there. One is the entry view, another one is going to be calling it as a general ledger view. Now, if I open the document in my finance module earlier in my SAP ECC, actually what is happening, all the documents, so the entry view documents are going to be stored in which table? The entry view documents are going to be stored in a BSID table, that is going to be calling it as the secondary index tables, and my general ledger view the GL view table means when I'm shifting the mode from the GL entry view to the GL view, the GL views are going to be stored in a different table, which I'm going to be calling it as a BSEG table. Very, very important. It is a BSEG table. So in SAP S/4HANA, when you come back to your SAP S/4HANA, now what the SAP S/4HANA has made it, now from today onwards, you don't have this secondary index table from today onwards. All the secondary index tables are completely removed.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. So even before going to S4, right? So just within ECC itself, so when you have this posting for an AR, you can see the data in BSEG, right?
BSEG and in BSID also.
Right, and if it is open, it's going to be in BSID, and once it's cleared, then it's taken out of BSID and
BSID to BSAD,
right? So in ECC itself, there is, the secondary index table are for performance reason, right? In ECC, so I think that's clear.
So
but
now,
yeah.
I'm coming to your question only. Now, both the tables. So now, for example, okay, you're coming to the point, sir. Now the same document I can see in the BSID and the same document I'm seeing in the BSEG also. I'm right, sir?
Yes.
Earlier, I'm talking in SAP ECC.
Right. I mean, when I look at ECC, right? So BSEG basically has all, right? It has AR, AP,
everything. It is called as a GL line item level table.
Exactly, right? And then the BSID, BSAD, and BSIK, whatever, each of those have.
Okay. Now everything is good.
AP and so on.
Okay, where is this BSID table, sir? This BSID table is built on the top of your BSEG table.
It's a redundant table, just carrying the AR open items.
Exactly. So why I'm going to be putting the BSID table on the database table? The database table is going to be called as the BSEG table, and on the top of the BSEG table, because the BSID will take the data from the BSEG. So why I'm going to be putting the BSID on the top of your BSEG table? Because what is happening here is nothing but, when I go and see the logic, when my technical teams are going to be writing on the logic to decrease the performance, means the performance. So additionally, if at any time, the technical team always will put on the logic so that there should not be any application performance, something like the application should not go behind the runtime. So they're going to be putting on all the index and the service index tables and the secondary index tables on the top of your database tables. Okay, now in SAP S/4HANA, what the system is telling that now from today onwards, no need to construct, no need to write any kind of aggregations on the top of your database tables from today onwards. No, nothing. You don't require all this BSID, BSIK, everything. You don't require anything. No, nothing is going to be required. Now, the logic of everything, the BSID, BSIK, I pull down to BSI. Now in SAP S/4HANA, I pull down all the logic to the same table which I'm going to be using earlier, called as the BSEG table. Means this BSEG table is live in my SAP S/4HANA, because now all the open item, very, very important, sir, all your open item and summarization. There is a concept called as the summarization concept. I can summarize the line items. So all the open items and the summarizations are going to be observed in the BSEG table. Why? Because from today onwards, I don't have this index and the secondary index tables are no more available. Why? Because I brought the logic to the BSEG table. Now the BSEG table is going to be having all these open items and the summarization. And apart from that, SAP is also going to bring you one more table, which is called as a new line item level table, where you can have the data of all the actual accounting documents from them. So that is the reason SAP OC8 table. Now, That is the reason. Now, what happens if I post all these customer open items and the vendor open items? Okay, so I'm going to be using the BSEC table as an open item level table. Now, why? Because all the secondary index and all these index tables and all these are going to be moved as a compatibility. We can call them as CDS view. You can only read the data. Now, the actual content of the data is no more available. Means no technical settings are available for all the secondary index tables in SAP S/4HANA. Only you can read the data from these tables and you can perform the logic, but you cannot delete or you cannot modify or you cannot change the data in the BSID table from today. And so the tables are available, but only for the reading purpose. They are going to be calling them as a compatibility view reading only. So we cannot delete or you cannot modify or you cannot change the tables in your SAP S/4HANA. So when I want to read the data of the open item, the system, what it will do, it will redirect and it will read the data from where? It will read the data from your BSEC table, not from the BSID table from the student. So to all the open items and the summarization, BSEC table is still live, and apart from that, all the line item data is going to be stored in the AC Docker table.
Okay, so the question is, what's the difference between BSEG and AC Doc A? And what you're saying is
that we are coming. So that we are coming in the coming classes. That I'm going to be explaining because this is a lengthy class. So that the topic is the lengthy. So we are going to be, when we are discussing about the structures of the tables, I'm going to discuss more detailed in that way.
Right, but essentially what you're saying is AC Doc A has line item level information, but whereas BSEG does not.
BSEC is also line item level table, but at the entry view. So for example, the concept of the ledgers, I think, sir. So we have the concept of leading ledger. And we have the concept of non-leading ledger. Non-leading ledger. Now, BSEC table will not have the RLD-NR specifications in the BSEC, and I can see the ledger specific RLD-NR updates are going to be done from the here. RLD-NR. RLD-NR is nothing but ledger field. It is going to be calling it as a ledger. So leading and non-leading ledgers data you can see in the AC Docker table, and without any ledger means BSEC table will not contain any kind of ledger specific postings are done to the BSEC table. Now from that, I'll tell you more this when you are talking about the concept of database table structures. Very important topic. It will take more than 1.5 hour time, so it will be very interesting for us. Okay, so what is happening here? So I'm completely eliminating now. I completely removing all the secondary index and the aggregate tables now from today onwards. So now entire the tables are going to be technically set based on the columnar storage. So when I go to the columnar storage, what is happening? I can see the compression of the data. I can compress the data as much as an extent based on the product or something like that. For example, if I take a person, the person is having name is going to be the John. John is supplying a product to me. John is supplying 3 different types of products. Okay, wheat, Johar, and the rice, something like. So I can compress the data based on the name. I can compress the data based on the quantity. I can compress the data based on the product he's going to be supplying. So the compression of the data I can see in my columnar storage, not in the row-based storage. So if I go and see the database tables, when I go and see this particular transaction in my SAP S/4HANA, this data is stored in a columnar storage, not in a row-based storage. So tomorrow we have the concept of differentiating between what is the columnar and what is the row-based and how it is going to be working. So tomorrow's class is going to be the very, 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 very important. So this is what exactly we call it as the in-memory concept. Anyone? Any doubts? See, all these 7 classes, the first 7 to 8 classes before we start about SAP S/4HANA. So we are still here only. We are still in the line of SAP as an in-memory platform. So we need to discuss about what is the business warehouse powered by SAP HANA, what is the business suite by HANA, what is the finance, simple finance. Now we don't call it as a simple finance. Now we call it as SAP S/4HANA. Everything. So these classes, the first 7 to 8 classes, what we are going to be discussing will be carrying about 12% of the weightage in your certification. 12% of the mark, 12% of the marks in your certification when you're writing an associate level certification in SAP S4 HANA management, finance management, or something like financial accounting and the management accounting. 8 to 12% of the questions are going to be coming from the basic things. So very, 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 very important. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to be seeing the class of columnar and the row base with the in memory. Okay, still we are not completed the in memory, so we are going to link this columnar and the row base to the in memory tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much.